Hello everybody, I am Gosia. Welcome to today's episodes of new mini topics. I always have a bunch of these topics accumulating and this is going to be one of them. Today we'll talk a little bit about toys in Taygeta, a short conversation with Yazhi, just to warm this up. Then we're going to talk about supposed magnetic problem with the nucleus of the Earth. And also this will go into the electric cars. Aneeka will talk about that. And then the topic came up of the temperature in space and the temperature of satellites in space. And Aneeka will respond to that as well. And then why isn't Aneeka sending a photo of the Earth? A lot of questions about that always, and it's going to be a short response from Aneeka. Then James Bond. Watch the new James Bond movie. Short Aneeka's comments on this topic. And then someone in the English world sent me a question about the underground complexes, dumps, maps. They wanted maps of that. And here is Athena and Yazhi responding interestingly to this question. And then someone in the Spanish world asked Robert about Hermaphrodites. Aneeka responds to that as well. And we'll finish off with Viagra. Viagra, yes, it also came up in the Spanish world. And since we talked about vasectomy, we will now give Aneeka's response about litigation of fallopian tubes in women. And is that recommended and what does it cause? So let's begin. First, a short conversation I had with Yazhi a while ago about toys. I was just asking her if she finds Earth toys for the children different than what it is like in Taygeta. Are they more creative, less creative than Taygetan toys? And she says they are totally different. I'm going to read most of these answers, so it's not from my memory what they said. It's specific answers they gave. So, totally different, Yazhi says. In Taygeta, you mostly have to make your own. Why would anybody bother mass produce a toy if they are not getting any profit from it? And here I'm asking, well, not to profit, but maybe to enjoy. Maybe some people like to enjoy producing toys, just like some people like to produce clothes for the community or build houses. And she says, well, then you ask someone who is to do it for you as a favor. And then you do something else for that person in any case. So I say, okay, so it seems like maybe there are people who specialize in toy making, for example. And she says, maybe, but it's unusual. I've never heard of one. And I said, wow, so what do you mean? Like people are creative enough to make these toys themselves, good enough themselves? And also, what about the designs, the idea for the toy? Do they make designs out of their heads based on some sort of catalogs or based on what? And Yazhi says, well, as for making the toys, the computers do most of the work for them anyway. They just tweak and print. It's hardly artistic, like making your toys with your hands. It's not artistic. But I say, but where do you get the idea from? It's one thing to have a computer and replicate whatever for you, but you need an idea first. And she says, well, from real life. For example, from another kid. From researching whatever is in the computers, like a sort of a web. It's not really a catalog. It's more like whatever is being shown off by the makers. So whoever made some toys in the past shows off what they did, and that gives ideas and inspires other people. She says, on Earth, there is a lot of motivation to create, to compete with others for a profit, for survival. In Taygeta, people make things like toys just because they like to do it, just because they love certain activity. Okay, let's continue to the next topic. This came up in the Spanish world, there was some sort of a statement somewhere or a confusion. I don't know. Someone was saying that there was a magnetic problem with the Earth, with the nucleus of the Earth, and that's why there is this confusion among animals, etc. That there's something wrong with the nucleus of the Earth. And Aneeka responds. I'll read this. Some are saying that there is a magnetic problem with the Earth, with the core, because it could change poles, and that is why animals are behaving out of control and dying, as has been reported. It is not that. My sensors confirm deep magnetic stability. The magnetic disturbance is real, but it is superficial. And it is artificial. My sensors indicate a strong chaotic electromagnetic soup all over the surface from so many microwaves. That is what is confusing the animals, and not the Earth itself. That is artificial. It's artificially done. It's not produced by the Earth itself. Again, by saying it is the Earth, with that pole shift stuff, it just diverts attention from the cabal flooding everything with magnetic waves and harp-like technology. It's them doing that, not the Earth. That's why they put graphene in everything, to increase the reactivity of all biology, especially human biology, to their electromagnetic grid. And that is conclusive from what my sensors tell me. She continues. Another point about 5G. People and conspiranoids are focused on 5G as if it is the problem. That's again more distractors. And I state it completely. 5G is just a useful range of frequencies. And yes, it's true, that useful range is especially harmful. But what happens is that there is a very wide range of electromagnetic ranges, all harmful to one extent or another, that envelop the Earth like a horrendous soup that strongly interferes with biology of all kinds. So it's the whole system, not just 5G. And Robert here is asking, but in addition to that, it's to lower the frequency, no? I imagine it lowers your frequency because it makes you sick. Aneeka says it's for a lot of things. For example, those frequencies look like brain frequencies. That means that they interfere with the functioning of the nervous system, and they cause a dense fog that prevents telepathy and all the knowledge that comes in with subtle energies, leaving only those of ultra-high frequency. Aneeka continues. The fact that it is not the Earth's core is a certainty. If there is one thing this ship has, it is magnetometers. My data is solid. It is the electromagnetic soup of human creation, cabal creation, that causes the problems with animals, humans, and the rest of biology. Robert is asking, and do you know where those radiations are coming from? Do you have the focal points? Aneeka says, from radars, from telecommunication systems, towers, satellites, military systems, weather control and manipulation systems, from radio stations, from TV stations, from the CB radios of truck drivers, from the walkie-talkie of the little boy Pete, from the baby monitor of Gonzalo family, from every cell phone in the pockets of millions, Wi-Fi systems, laptops, computers, TV screens, CRT, microwave ovens. Shall I go on? There are other technologies that do not cause any of that. Now, regarding carbon, this is going to be something interesting for you who are using electric cars, electric motors, motorcycles, or hybrids. Regarding carbon, to reduce carbon, with that, they want to remove gasoline cars, leaving only electric cars, which is just another agenda. Only very few will have them. The rest of the population will not have their own vehicles. They will be unaffordable. And the few that will have them will also be controlled, because the electric cars in the first place do not have autonomy and take time to recharge, because the batteries are junk and cause too much weight in the vehicle. Electric motorcycles are even worse, even more junk, because a motorcycle is small, then its batteries are also small, so they have no autonomy. You are impressed by what they can do on track, but for 5 minutes, then they don't run anymore. And they celebrate motorcycles and electric bicycles that do work for short trips to the store to buy. That's what they are good for. However, it is almost a toy. It does not give you independence of movement. You can't go far. So the population is confined to farms, cities, since they can't move from city to city without going through government controls using public transportation. So electric and promoting it only promotes the destruction of humanity. They want to fight for humanity and for the planet and the ecosystems, be ecological. Although it sounds illogical as a result of the propaganda in the media, it is better to have an 8-cylinder car like a Mustang, or what do I know, than a hybrid or electric, since an 8-cylinder causes less environmental damage and less pollution than what it causes to generate the same amount of electricity to feed the electric Prius. I don't know what Prius is. Yes, some kind of a car. And all those environmentalists supporting electric cars are not only supporting their own destruction, but also that of countless ecosystems. They should see how polluting it is to manufacture a lithium battery like the one in the cars, motorcycles, or electric bicycles. Or how polluting it is to manufacture the kilowatt of electric energy in plants that burn coal, or highly destructive atomic energy. And here Robert is saying, well, it's just that people do not see it that way, Aneeka. They are told that the electric does not pollute because it does not expel gases. And Aneeka here responds, again, they might manipulate people because the gas emission and noise of an 8-cylinder is obvious to them, and the pollution from nuclear or coal-burning plants they don't see. Again, it is manipulation of perception with propaganda. And the ways of generating alternative electrical energy is laughable. It is another cover to justify and launder money, because wind energy generates an amount in kilowatts that is worse than pathetic compared to the cost of production or manufacture of those giant blades in the mountains that only turned out to be genocide-level bird traps. And solar energy is even less efficient. And again, the manufacture of solar panels is highly polluting for the almost microwatts they produce. And here she's saying, but of course this is someone speaking who uses zero-point energy, so I see everything else as primitive in the extreme. Well, I thought this was going to be interesting for any of you who are using electric cars or is thinking of buying one, or hybrids or electric bicycles and etc. Just remember that all of these mini topics, the transcripts of them will be on the website as well, so you'll be able to read it. It's not going to just disappear into the ethers somewhere there on my channel. Let's continue to the next topic, and this is about the space and the temperature of the satellites, because Aneeka saw a video where someone was mentioning the thermosphere and exosphere, talking about all these layers there, and they were discussing how the satellites are located at the level where temperature is super high, 1500 to 2000 degrees Celsius, and that the satellites couldn't take that temperature. And here Aneeka is clarifying this whole topic, and she says, people confuse things. Space has no temperature. Objects in space do. Minus 273.15 degrees Celsius, absolute zero, is when all molecular motion stops completely. But if an object is in space or wherever, it will have its temperature depending on what it is doing or where that object is. That is, in space, a satellite is receiving solar radiation, and from the Earth, electromagnetic one, and from its own internal electrical systems, by the very fact that it is in space. In a vacuum, seen from low densities, 3D or 5D, wrongly said, but as a reference. From 3D, 5D, the space is a vacuum. Higher up, space is basically water, ether. And she continues, but from the point of view useful to humans, it is a vacuum, the space. There, by the laws of thermodynamics in a vacuum, there can be no temperature transfer. So for an object in space, like a spacecraft, it will not be able to radiate its temperature. So inside a spacecraft, or for a spacecraft, or for a satellite, the real problem is that it cannot cool down. Now, since she said that from 3D the space is vacuum, I'm asking, but from your point of view, 5D, it is also vacuum and it cannot have temperature transfer? And she says, from my point of view, 5D, it is still a vacuum, but with the knowledge that it is water in a useful form, that is 0-point energy. So space is not cold, it is only inert. And the temperature of objects depends on what processes external to them or internal to them cause them to accumulate heat. I'm asking, space is 0-point energy? Well, she says not exactly, but here in 5D we know how to use the high characteristics of the space, water, ether flow, fluid in high frequency, to produce 0-point energy. She continues, so it is true that at a certain height above the Earth, satellites and spacecraft do accumulate a lot of temperature. But it is not space that is hot, but the satellites and spacecraft, because they receive solar radiation and radiation from the Earth that, together with the electrical processes of their own systems, can accumulate a quite considerable temperature. And it cannot be cooled like an automobile would by radiating its extra heat with a radiator, liquid flow. So the only way to cool a ship, or whatever, in space, is to convert that heat energy into more electrical energy for consumption. But these are very advanced systems. So for a ship, the problem is temperature buildup, not cold, as they mistakenly tell you in the movies. Now, this is from another conversation, but it continues in the same topic. Aneeka continues here. In orbit, it is not that space has temperature, but that the surface of the satellites, if the sun hits them, is very high, and if not, it is very low. But it's not about temperature per se, but about radiation that would produce a thermal reaction. That way, yes, it happens, but it is not space. Space is nothing. It is empty from the 3D point of observation. I am not talking about the ethers. Therefore, it only is and cannot have temperature other than that of the thermometer itself. Like any object in space, it depends on the radiation it receives on its surface or atmosphere, depending also on its ability to radiate the temperature acquired by radiation from the sun and its ability to transfer heat into its interior. It is not easy to calculate to be able to say what its temperature is. Okay, she continues. In the case of advanced spacecraft like this one, the solar radiation is not reaching it because the spacecraft is permanently under a series of energy shields that do not allow the hull of the spacecraft to be affected. While on the topic, it should be clarified that the sun does not heat the Earth or it doesn't heat anything, but gives off radiation that reacts with objects and planets with a result compatible with the idea of heat. And here Robert is asking, and you are in which layer? Are you at 480 kilometers approximately in the same layer as the satellites? The satellites are there, right? Here just a short comment. At the time of that conversation, they were at that height, 480 kilometers approximately. But now, just recently, they have suffered an attack from the Earth. Well, not them exactly directly, but it was aimed at. They were aiming Alphaton ship. It was some sort of a I don't know, energy weapon, or I'm gonna actually make this in another video talking about this. But the Kabbalah from the Earth was aiming at the Alphaton ship, and by proximity they suffered some damage there. Everybody is okay though, but they decided to move higher. So like right now they are in a higher orbit. Just that little update here at this point. So Robert is saying, in that layer, at that time of the conversation, 480 kilometers is the same layer as the satellites, and they are there, right? So here Aneeka is responding, yes, in the same layer where the ISS, the International Space Station, is supposed to be. Because even though, yes, it exists, it is not as they say it. For example, you are told that there are thousands and thousands of satellites. From here, I tell you that there are not so many. I do not have the number of how many, but those in operation, they do not exceed 1,000 by far. But I don't have the number. The rest is space junk. Now she's here continuing with the subject of the radiation and the temperature of the satellites in space. She says, although I see some sense in solar radiation, not solar heat, mind you, causing elevated temperature on exposed surfaces on satellites and spacecraft. But according to my data, it wouldn't raise that kind of temperature over 1,000 degrees Celsius. The only thing that makes sense to me is that since there is no way to radiate that temperature, it would accumulate at that level. That's the only way I see sense in that talk about heat, that it would be accumulative in the absence of cooling methods. The problem with spacecraft is heat buildup, not cold. That's why we use energy shields. And even then we have problems controlling the temperature of the spacecraft. We have elaborate cooling systems that translate stored heat into electrical energy for consumption. Yes, the fires are the problem on the ship, not the cold. And here just Robert is asking about the Chinese ISS. What exactly is that? She says, yes, the Chinese ISS, another junk can. It's the same thing, a smaller Chinese version of the ISS. but it's empty. Yes, there are no astronauts there either. They are giving you CGI and green screen. And talking about CGIs, screens, photography, the question that always appears is this: why don't they show a picture of the Earth? Well, simply put, because of the Federation regulations. But there's going to be an interesting point here made. Aneeka says, simply because it would not pass the Federation's filters, and it would automatically be discredited by anyone. These types of photos are a no. Photos are a no. We simply can't. Notice, neither can NASA. See and notice that. Have you ever seen photos of the Earth from a distance, given by NASA? Supposedly they are having rovers on Mars and operations on the Moon or whatever they had. Where are the photos of the Earth? The Federation has rules about giving photos of the Earth from that distance because it breaks the illusion of the Earth matrix they wish to maintain if such photos were given. As we explained in the videos about the Federation, they wish to maintain this system on Earth as the separated realm in which we think we are alone, basically. So here I'm asking why NASA can't give real pictures. And she says it cannot, only from low orbit. I say, well, NASA can't because they don't go out there that far. But SSP, Secret Space Program, why don't they share any photos? You know, the ones going to Mars and all those people going and jumping to all these different places in the universe, supposedly. Well, some do for sure. Aneeka says, well, NASA can't. First, because they don't go that high. They don't. And secondly, the ships that can, they don't give photos because of the same agreements and rules with the Federation that bind us also. No one shares photos of Earth from that distance. No one. The SSP does not share, and she's saying here, because if you are good observers, SSP stands for Secret Space Program. Secret. That is secret. And they would not give that to people or anything that comes from them. This photo, for example, is a fake. That's a fake photo. NASA can only give photos from low orbit. So short answer, Federation rules and regulations. Now, someone in the English world has asked me a question about the underground complexes, dumps, maps. They wanted us to provide maps for those underground settlements and systems. The question was this. Somewhere in your videos you mentioned large 12-level underground complex for ships and bases for nuclear submarines. Any sketches, maps of that? First responds Athena. She says, we would have to elaborate one. And the only other one out there is the one John Lear has. His information about the underwater tunnels from California coast to Area 51 and beyond are spot on accurate. Entrance under California coast. But here we have additional information from Yazhi Swaruu, and this is a very interesting answer. I'm going to read it exactly as she said it. There are plenty of dumb maps available on the internet. However, none state that, although they are all connected, you can go from California Pacific Ocean under the entire continental US and exit the Texas Gulf of Mexico coast underwater by submarine. It's not only a series of seawater flooded passageways, but an actual entrance and the usage of underground oceans, part of the hollow earth. And these oceans are not so deep underground and actually connect with the surface oceans via underwater deep continental canyons that are already mapped and used by the US Navy for underwater operations using nuclear submarines. So I cannot provide an entire map of the passageways without revealing the exact map and shape of the underground seawater systems the US Navy is using, which, understandably so, is highly classified, above top secret. Yes, I have them in detail, because we can see from here under the ground using our gravitometer instruments located in this ship's nose boom. I hope this is a good translation, nose boom. And I have been following submarines maneuvering under there as recently as last night, because I was looking at the whereabouts of one specific US Navy submarine that has clearly been shadowing my activities for over 2 years. I cannot provide maps of these underground seas that are part of Hollow Earth and the passageways the US Navy use, because I would call out too much attention towards Robert and Gosia, because as I have mentioned above, these places are highly classified, and exposing them to the public, even in a low detail level, can cause problems with the US government. Even claiming to have such maps as I did here may be enough for them to look into this, as what I just said is well above the next person who is talking about this in detail, and that person is John Lear. He mentions all this, but does not say one important thing, and that is that you can go from coast to coast under the entire continental US using a submarine and using natural canyon formations, natural underground hollow earth seas and oceans, and also artificially constructed underwater passageways and dumps. I can tell you that the operational depth of these passageways is not much, and it is on average around 600 meters, well in the capacity of a last generation nuclear submarine, such as Virginia class Batch 2 and Los Angeles class Batch 2 attack nuclear submarine. I have no more comments on this. This is way beyond my level of expertise and way beyond my level of knowledge of these topics. So I'll just quietly move on to the next subject. The next subject is to recommend a movie, James Bond. If you haven't seen the newest movie, James Bond, watch it, because there are several layers of agendas there. It's all basically spelled out for you as it is. And as we spoke with Aneeka about this is what Aneeka said. Yes, it all comes out there in that movie. There is a mine of information on various agendas, layer upon layer of signals and messages. A lot of people criticize the movie, and rightly so, but for superficial things, and they don't connect it to the papayas. And note something, she says. They delayed getting that movie out to the public because of the pandemic, that they say so they wouldn't lose money because people don't go to the movies. But what I see is that they delayed bringing it out to the public so that they wouldn't see the message until it was too late. In detail, they say it all there in that movie. The plan to destroy humanity. The papayas, the nanotech, how they have a technology to only target a specific type of population and not others, for example, and other things. Another agenda, interesting secondary agenda, even though there are many, she says, the war against masculinity. The Bond is replaced by a woman. That's why they destroyed James Bond, because he is a male role model for the new generations. Because what they always tell us is that there is this there is this destruction of gender happening in the society, and that's done on purpose as well. Now, she says, I should clarify that I have nothing against women of action, considering myself one myself. And there is nothing wrong with a woman being empowered in action in that sense. The problem is that it's already an ongoing agenda, film after film after film, coupled with more things against men, all going towards the destruction of masculinity, because there are no or extremely few examples left for men to follow of how to be men. So here you can see, even though Taygetans are a matriarchal society, they have a very clearly defined idea of a man. They are very clearly defined gender, women and men, and they protect the masculinity as much as they protect femininity. Is very well differentiated, and they don't like what's happening on Earth with regards to that. With this ongoing propaganda against the clearly differentiated genders and against destruction of the masculinity, so to speak. They explain that there is a deeper agenda going on here, but that's for another topic maybe. Let's go actually to Hermaphrodites, maybe slightly related. This was coming out in the Spanish world. Someone asked Robert about Hermaphrodites. What happens there? Well, Aneeka responds, very rarely a hermaphrodite will have both male and female sex organs that are functional. Not only because one will be better developed than the other, but because of the psychological disorders it causes. The causes can be several. In the physical aspect, because it was about to have a sister or brother of the opposite sex, but they were largely fused, since they did not become Siamese twins. Also, a disorder in the XX female and XY male chromosomes, creating an X-contaminated Y, to put it simply. Since the dominant chromosomes, genetically speaking, are the X chromosomes. They're explaining that the female chromosome is the dominant one. This is important because as a species, or genetically, the female, the XX, is the dominant one, since without it there is no reproduction. That is why the Swaroos are all females, for example. So, the male is an altered female, so to speak, but based on altering a female zygote, since, this is very curious, I didn't know this, since all the fetuses or zygotes are female until the second week of gestation, which is where the male sexual characteristics are formed. That is why men have nipples, because they were formed before the Y chromosome that develops masculinity came into action. Very interesting explanation about why men have nipples. Now, this is important here as well. Aneeka says, I don't want to degrade or attack men anymore, because they have enough on Earth nowadays. They are very strongly against the destruction of masculinity. But, genetically speaking, the female is the dominant one, tending with it also a stronger and more stable sexual and gender identity. I do not mean that men do not have a strong gender identity, but they may prove to be more vulnerable to the influence of the opposite gender. Another factor that supports this is that penile erection depends on clear psychological factors and on having a specific male-specific outlook on life. So if anything alters this psychological predisposition, you will have erectile dysfunction problems that will only further aggravate your sexual identity problem, or your self-esteem and identity, or your self-perception. And here, talking about this issue of this type of dysfunction, the question came up about Viagra in the Spanish channel. So Aneeka responds about this subject. She says, yes, Viagra contains sildenafil, a chemical compound. The problem is that it is a vasodilator, and it dilates the whole body, brain, and eyes as well. And the eyes are very susceptible. The use of sildenafil increases the risk of retinopathy and blindness in the short or medium term. It promotes strokes as well. But not only does it cause that, it causes the penis to stay erect too long, hurting the small blood vessels inside, making the person lose the ability to have an erection naturally, making them dependent on big pharma. In many other serious cases, the erection does not cease, causing a destruction of the penile tissue with cellular necrosis. There have been cases where they have lost their member because of using sildenafil. The use of Viagra sildenafil is very dangerous. I don't know if there are other types of Viagras without this component of sildenafil, but at least here you know to avoid that. Now, interesting fact, she continues. Important fact about the sildenafil that is in Viagra. In case of pulmonary edema, I just don't know if this is correctly translated, pulmonary edema due to altitude, like the one mountaineers get, taking Viagra can save their lives, even in extreme cases, because it opens the pulmonary capillaries to greater oxygenation capacity, but only as a measure in the mountain site, while they go down to lower altitude. And this serves both men and women equally. Quite an interesting fact here about Viagra. And now, as we are still on this topic of this area of life, this is the last topic for today. We have talked about vasectomy, and many women asked about what about the litigation of the tubes. So here Aneeka responds shortly. In human females, litigation of fallopian tubes, or cutting them to isolate the ovaries, does cause some problems because they too need an external flow out of the female body. This may cause cysts and fibromas, and in some cases may increase the probability of ovarian cancers. But in general this is rare and is not really anything to be worried about if the woman has been ligated years back. The ovaries will release an egg or two once a month, and it will get stuck in the cut of fallopian tube. But the amount of eggs in a lifetime getting stuck there is very small, and eggs do decompose and are absorbed with no problems. So even with no flow to the exterior, this cannot compare to the male problem of having a vasectomy, because men literally get flooded with sperm cells, flooded to a collapse point, because they are producing millions and millions each day, and they all get trapped in the bloodstream and all over his body with no way to get out. This sums up and concludes this MiniTopics session. I have more, but I have to put them away for the next one because it's just too much. It takes too much time for me to read all this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was somehow useful. As I told you before, the transcript of what Aneeka said, of what Yazhi or Athena said, it will be provided on the website swaruu.org very, 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 very soon. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your support. And I'm going to see you very soon in the very near future. Until next time. Bye-bye.